everyone, it's a pleasure, and I'm glad to be back and talking about, well, things that aren't Copa America related. Everyone, well, the past couple of days has been talking about, in terms of South American football, obviously European football is in a bit of a reprieve due to summer vacation and the end of Euro 2020. And again, congratulations to all my Italian brethren as they're still celebrating. But for the most part, let's switch over, of course, and see what happened. Copa Libertadores started this week, and one of the big topics that I have not been able to truly grasp is the use of VAR. Again, I've always been a proponent of it, not because it's something that I like to see, not because I want more time to be taken in refereeing decisions, but because refereeing has been so poor the past few years that there is a need to improve refereeing. And since that is not being done completely in some confederations, that there's a need for that. It is a necessary tool. It is a necessary evil. But that being said, you can have the greatest car in the world. You can have the most expensive, luxurious, high-performance vehicle, but if you don't know how to drive it, it doesn't do you any good. You can have the best computer in the world. It's not going to make you more intelligent. You can have the greatest tools around at your disposal, and those things are going to not serve you if you don't know how to use them properly. And that is the case with South America and VAR. Of course, I can go into Europe and VAR as well, but it's a different aspect of it in which it's more for the immediacy of the moment instead of trying to get it right or trying to find any little thing that will make you right. It's two different ways of seeing VAR. Sometimes it's two different ways of using VAR incorrectly. Let's be straight out with it. There were two calls, and I was on one of them. I was doing commentary for Fluminense and Cerro Porteño the other day when I see it was Mauro Boselli scoring, and I said, oh, it's, goal. But I saw all the way on the other end of the pitch that one of the assistants had his flag raised, so offside. Immediately say, okay, offside. When you see the replay, it was blatantly onside, but obviously, as the commentator, I can't do anything to switch the way in which a referee or VAR is seeing the game. So, of course, one says, in my opinion, it's this. When you see that in reality, it was a goal. It was a legitimate goal. The more you see the replay, the more you laugh because you don't want to cry. Because that was how bad it was. That's how bad that call was by the referee, by Facundo Tello. And then, of course, even worse, by the VAR, which was Christian Deisler, who, instead of keeping, okay, fine, he starts... VAR refs seem to just be very good at geometry, in my opinion. They're good at throwing lines, looking at angles, seeing where this line has to be, the other perpendicular line where it has to be. Okay, boom, done. What those referees didn't realize is that if they zoomed out, they saw who the actual player that was making the demarcation for the offside was, which was maybe about 2 meters further up. They just went in, zoomed in, automatic, boom, 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 boom. Okay, no, done, offside. When you see it, of course, I put it on social media. Hundreds of other people have put it on social media. Actually, where the play was and how incompetent that call was. Again, VAR is not the problem, ladies and gentlemen. VAR are cameras, monitors, computers. They don't make the calls, okay? Robots don't make the calls, as I've heard many people say in the past. It's human beings, and human error still reigns supreme in terms of these decision-making processes because they don't know how to use these instruments properly, because they don't know also how to interpret the rules in many cases as well. Case in point, the match between Universidad Católica and Palmeiras. You see that occur as well, and it was quite the event there. Of course, I'm not going to get into the diatribe of explaining the entire situation, but of course a handball was called. If I see it, I don't think that he was expanding his area. Of course, you going sideways and it hits the, your right shoulder's facing the ball, and the ball ends up hitting your left arm, which is away from the ball, and they're saying that that player was expanding his overall frame. Okay, well, you have to see it on. You have to see it, and I'll have the video up on social media as well. You make your impression. You give your impression. You make your conclusion based on that. To me, it wasn't. To many in media, it wasn't. And again, it was a call that wasn't made by the referee. It was made by VAR, and they're the ones that had a handball. And that's where they got the ball. That's where they got the penalty. That's where Palmeiras was able to score, and Palmeiras was able to come away with a win from Chile. Now, I didn't see the entire match to give an impression of how the other 90 plus minutes went, but I know that there is a great deal of displeasure when it comes to the refereeing on that evening. Will there be more referees suspended? Probably. I wouldn't be surprised in the least bit if you have a couple more referees that are suspended because of poor decisions, and rightfully so. I mean, sometimes it's unfortunate, but sometimes you have to honestly wonder, how first of all, they got their refereeing degree. Second of all, how they interpret the game. And for players, and as well as coaches, it's very confusing going from game to game, having different interpretations of the same rule going 10 different directions. So you have to give the fair discourse and say, you know what? I don't know. You have to know how each referee referees in order, pardon the redundancy there, but you have to know that in order for you to be able to prepare a game. And it's ridiculous when it's one set rule. Maybe, yeah, of course, there's some rules that can be considered poorly redacted. Okay, I can give you that. But when you go into a match and you prepare a certain way, and then you have to go to another match and prepare a certain way and say, oh, wait a second, this referee calls things like this, so we're going to have to do things in a different way, it ends up being quite preoccupying. Because there is no one universal way of looking at the game, or one universal interpretation of the game, or one universal interpretation of the rules, for that matter. And it's something that confuses players, and it's much to their dislike. And I would not blame them one bit. Now, if you start looking at it from another perspective, it totally invalidates and has invalidated. I totally understand why there's people that are completely against VAR. Don't get me wrong. If these calls are being made, if there are certain nonsensical things that have been called, just because a jersey flaps a little bit more than the other, that's an offside, and you have a player off by 1 centimeter. I don't constitute, that to me that doesn't constitute an offside or having an advantage over a player 1 centimeter. To me, okay, that's my opinion. But in the most part, I mean, that doesn't give you an advantage over any player. Now, if it's a half a body or a length and a half, if you want to talk about horse racing or something like that, then yeah, okay, then that's legit. But these little differences, where 2, 3, 5 years ago that even was pretty much on, I would say they're even in a lot of cases. But it goes beyond that, because even those types of calls I can forgive. Because you know what? The referee can always go and say, I was abiding by the book. And by the book, they're correct. By the book, they're absolutely spot on. But that doesn't mean that the rule isn't poorly redacted. Because at this point, what technology is exposing is certain rules and the irrelevance of them in 2021 because of technology. Now you say, oh, this guy's slightly off. Okay. But again, as I said before, that doesn't constitute an offside. Knowing how these athletes are, does it necessarily mean that you have 1 centimeter, you're going to be able to beat someone on a run? No, not really. But technology does expose those things now. because you can go down to, the 100th of a frame, or, something ridiculous like that, to really microscopic types of definitions where you can say, well, so-and-so's hair is slightly off. So yeah, offside. That can be measured at this point. Now, does it mean that it's correct? No, it doesn't. But this goes beyond that. A player, referee not knowing where offside is. A referee not being able to interpret that a player, just because they put their hands on someone else's back, that doesn't mean that they're pushing. Doesn't mean that it's enough to push, or it's even enough force to generate a player to get off balance. Doesn't mean that. And that's where referees are getting it wrong. A couple of years ago, I was at SoccerX, and I ran into the head of referees for CONCACAF, and he's like, "Oh, you've been mighty hard on us." I said, "No, I haven't. I've been actually very fair. I don't think you deserve, or I don't think referees deserve some of the heat that they're getting. Yes, because at times referees, now give them credit too, referees at times have to make decisions in 0.12 seconds, 0.2 seconds, when us commentators have 5 different angles that we can look at, 26 different cameras, different speeds, different angles. You can even zoom in and make our decision. You see, now it's offside after seeing it for 25 times. Referee doesn't have that luxury in certain cases. Now they do because of VAR. That's where we should be looking at the positive of it, but it's not the case. Still, within that, they still make their mistakes, and their mistakes are more severe than what I can make in first instance. I can always go, "Oh yeah, I was wrong. Okay, well, it isn't," which was the case. Or you say, "Oh yeah, it was offside." Ooh, no, he wasn't. That doesn't mean anything in a broadcast. Where it does mean something different is in a game where I'm refereeing, and that goal could have meant the difference between a team going in with a 2-1 deficit or a 2-0 deficit into the next leg. When you have millions of dollars, when you have hundreds upon hundreds of hours of training invested by coaches and players and coaching staffs and directors and clubs and federations. Now, is it the end of the world? No, it's not. No, it's not. But it does harm. It does complicate things in terms of players and the time that all the investments, emotional, financial, etc., that have been made in order for these players to be in tip-top shape and to be ready for each and every challenge that they face week in and week out. That's exactly what it's about. So when you look at it, understand, coming into certain events, who's doing VAR? That's always very important. When I go into broadcasts, I always say, "Ooh, look who's doing VAR, so-and-so. Ooh, this one's going to be interesting. Ooh, my God, Or, oh, you know what? This guy's solid. We'll probably see a couple of VAR decisions that'll be correct. No problem." So just remember, when you hear, "Oh, VAR needs to be abolished, VAR this, VAR that," it's not VAR, man. It's poor refereeing. It's poor education of referees. And also, let's keep in mind, referees do have an ego of their own. Referees don't want to be told that they're wrong, that they are right. They are the only ones that are right. There is that human element into it. And as I mentioned before, when I did something for The Guardian a couple of years back before the World Cup, that was going to be one of the big issues. So far, I've seemed like a bit of an oracle, and that's a scary thing when I'm the oracle. But keep that in mind always when you start looking at referees and poor refereeing decisions. You're going to start seeing it a lot more, especially with Gold Cup, especially when the quarterfinals of the Copa Libertadores come up. Liga MX, that's always an interesting thing to look at when it comes to VAR. All those things, keep those in mind when the time comes, because people are going to start talking about it all over again, and it's going to be the same arguments. But then you have to look at it and you have to shift over and say, well, why is this like that? Is everything so bad in terms of VAR that everyone's messing up? Or is it that everyone's messing up because they're not very good at it? And that was my big complaint to Mark Kane, the head of referees of CONCACAF at that point, which he kind of stayed quiet and really didn't say much after that. Just remember that, because, again, like I said, VAR is not the problem. The problem is the referees that have been making mistakes since before the onset of VAR and continue to make those mistakes to now, because it's set in their minds that they are right and only they are correct.